Good morning. Fairly grey day out there today, so a bit wet and windy and wild, so I'm kind of holed up in my kitchen today. Actually got quite a quiet day today, which is great, so I'm going to make the most of it and not do much. Which is great sometimes, not to do much, because for whatever reason, even when we're not busy, we seem quite busy, really. Even this whole concept of doing in our lives has different levels, right? and we've become so used to, particularly in the West, doing at a certain level. Even when we have a day off, we're still doing, yeah, but just doing different things. So if we're working, we're doing. If we have a day off, we're doing stuff around the house or catching up on errands or catching up on admin, and then by the time you know it, the day's ended. And you're back in bed and it's like, and you're feeling tired physically and mentally again. So it's really important to take time to actually relax, okay? A lot of people, you know, when they ask, how do I get spiritual experience? Okay, how do I get spiritual experience or spiritual experiences? For starters, you know, what I found when I was striving in the past for spiritual experiences, they never used to come to me, you know, because I wasn't relaxed. I was always trying to look for the next kind of message, or for the next visual aid, or for the next feeling of spirit flowing through me, whatever, you know. It was, and even when I was doing my work, in the past, the mind was kicking in too much, you know, too much overthinking of the process. And you learn that ultimately, and you have to, you guys, you know, whoever's watching these videos, if you're interested in kind of developing spiritual experiences in your life and reconnecting with the aspect of existence, which isn't just this material body, you have to be open to it. You have to kind of open yourself to it. And to open yourself to it, you have to surrender. You have to let go of pretty much everything that's going on primarily in here. Because the soul and spirit tends to speak to us more through our feelings, through our emotions, not from an overly emotional perspective, because, you know, when we're not working with that energy center correctly, when we're not transforming impressions correctly within that energy center, we can start to kind of create a very large short circuit there, which creates kind of explosive emotional outbursts. But the soul speaks through feeling more than thinking. You know, the thinking stuff orders the feeling stuff. You know, we're all connected, and then the lower center then can kind of kick into gear and create some action through, you know, the messages that are coming through the physical body. This physical body is amazing, really. It's like it's an antenna for the spirit, but it's also a vehicle for the spirit to kind of do its thing, yeah? But in order to really get in touch with your spirit and your soul, you've got to relax. You really do have to relax. You've got to kind of surrender and get into a very deep state of relaxation for you to really get in touch with your inner landscape. How do you relax? You know, a lot of people think they can relax by sitting in front of the television or having a glass of wine, or even, like, you know, doing active sports. You know, they find it relaxing because the sport is moving energy and they're getting a sense of fulfillment and an endorphin buzz from training down the gym, doing their thing, you know, all that kind of stuff, which is great. But it's not really deep relaxation. Deep relaxation means getting the mind, heart, and motor centers into a different frequency. The mind has to begin to reach different levels of frequency that aren't so much engaged in what we would daily class as conscious waking reality. The heart has to feel open to receiving impressions, emotional impressions. The heart has to almost be not necessarily at rest, but at peace. And the body in itself, in many ways, has to be at rest too. So to deeply relax, you have to get into a position and a posture which is comfortable. Okay? To deeply relax, you have to be in an environment which isn't too distracting. Yeah? Obviously, the ultimate test of spiritual development, as people keep saying, is, you should be able to relax and be in a state of spiritual receivership, no matter what's going on around you, no matter how chaotic your external environment is. That's very difficult. If you've got kids screaming in your ear, demanding parents, whatever, wherever you're at, or bosses at work doing crazy shit, or whatever, it's all out there at the moment. Go find it. It's very difficult to maintain a relaxed state of being. I won't just call it a relaxed state of mind, a relaxed state of being within all of this. No one said it was easy. Okay, it takes work, it takes practice to do it, really. And that's why it's so important to practice. Okay? And that doesn't mean having to sit cross-legged for 8 hours a day. It could mean having to take yourself off for 10 minutes to somewhere quiet to focus on your breathing, to focus on your breath, to do some pranayama, so to draw in the breath, but in a very conscious way, to raise the breath from the Muladhara, the root chakra, up to the Anya chakra, up to the crown chakra, okay? To visualize, visualize energy and prana rising through your system, rising through your spinal cord, through the Sushumna, all the way up to the head, to the crown center. But also coming down as well, so creating a bit of an energetic loop that goes through you. And ultimate, a lot of meditation teachers out there and relaxation teachers talk about emptying your mind. Empty your mind, just switch off completely and fall asleep. Yeah, I mean, being asleep is very relaxing, right? But we kind of want to get into a state of relaxation where we can still be very conscious and aware. Okay, a very meditative state where we're not dropping off, or we're not so in the void that there is absolutely nothing happening. Okay. Part of the way Spirit talks to us is through visualization, through images, through imagination. Yeah? Clairvoyance, right, is a term that has been corrupted. Like a lot of spiritual stuff has been corrupted over the centuries. When people say, "Oh, I'm clairvoyant," or someone says he's or she's clairvoyant, there seems to be this air of mystery about the individual. Oh wow, they're prophetic. They can see things. They can commune with spirit using visualization and visual images. And that's true. But ultimately, what clairvoyance is a strong ability to use your imagination. Okay, where do you think ideas, theories, and things come from? It comes from our imagination. We don't suddenly create something out of not having an initial spark or inspiration. And that inspiration, in spiritu, that inward spiritual experience creates a power, a force within us that drives us to then ground that into physical reality, or not, as the case may be. Sometimes we can imagine lots of things. Yeah, if we work with our visualization capabilities, we can imagine lots of things, but we don't necessarily always ground those. Simple example might be, I was doing over the summer I was doing my garden. I didn't just start digging my garden. Some people do. I mean, so you can imagine as you're going, all right. But I kind of sat and tried to visualize what the garden would look like, and I used to try to get ideas of what the garden would look like in my mind, in my mind's eye. Okay. So a lot of people, when they're trying to visualize or they're trying to meditate, they're trying to still use their physical eyes to see stuff. All right. It's not about using your physical eyes. When your eyes are closed, you cannot use your physical eyes. Start small when you're trying to imagine, when you're trying to commune with spirit. Try to use, I don't know, imagine an apple in your head, or imagine a banana in your brow center. So you close your eyes and you pick a small image to try and imagine, to try and visualize. And you start small. If you struggle to visualize, start small. Meditate for 10 minutes and try to hold an image in your mind's eye. A candle flame is always a good one, okay? Something to focus the attention, focus the energy into. And as you start to build the ability to imagine, okay, what you're then doing is ultimately you're starting to work within the more subtle nature of reality, your subtle bodies, your astral bodies, your mental body, your etheric bodies, okay? These live in the realm of imagination. This physical body, pretty solid, yeah? And our conscious daily mind, our senses, yeah, govern our activities, okay? So it creates the feedback loop for consciousness to be able to experience this physical reality. Consciousness is ultimately perception. The consciousness is simply the ability to perceive something. Okay? So I can perceive this reality just by being in it. Yeah, consciousness is like a feedback loop. We project outwardly and we receive, and therefore we perceive. Yeah? So when we're working with consciousness, when we're trying to create, when we want to develop the soul a little bit more, we have to start to develop our internal landscape and understand what we're projecting our attention onto. Okay, where is our consciousness? Where is our perception being drawn into? And ultimately, where is it getting trapped? Okay, where is it getting trapped? I mean, dreams, sometimes if you have dreams, they're a great way of understanding where your consciousness might be getting trapped. If you have some quite infernal dreams, some quite, nightmarish dreams at times, these are sometimes an indication of what's happening in the lower world of your psyche, okay? Or even, lower than the subconscious, there's an infraconscious realm, which is really dark, yeah? So if you've ever had really scary dreams, monsters and all sorts of crazy stuff, that could be a representation of where some of your consciousness might be bottled up, might be trapped. And it's always good to explore that when you're ready to, it's not sometimes it's not good to explore it if you're not ready, because it can be quite troubling, where we may have pushed away some of our shadow. But more often than not, as we start to develop ourselves through spiritual practice, we become more curious about what our attention, what our consciousness gets drawn into, and why. Obviously, consciousness perceives. We are consciousness working through various forms, physical vehicles, and we get very attached. We get very attached to the so-called realities that we become part of, and very identified with them. So the more the consciousness is identified with something, kind of the more imprisoned it is, or the more imprisoned you end up being, okay? identification with all sorts of things. You know, we can identify, I made some notes here, we can identify with aspects of our material existence, for example, you know, cars, houses, prestige, power, clothing, yeah, image, yeah. So imagination can create an image, but if we are identified with that, if we think that's what we are, then we start to get lost in it, start to get really trapped in it, okay? Because it's not what we are. Because everything that creates through imagination and physically through energy changes. Birth, death, yeah? And there's no stability to this. So why identify with it? Enjoy it, but don't identify with it. If you identify with it, what you build then is this resistive ego, which doesn't see the truth behind the conscious perception. Okay? What else do we get identified with? We get identified with reactive whims, egocentric kind of senses of entitlement, and we get trapped in kind of our inability to filter out some of our desires. Sometimes our desire system can be so strong, has such a grip on our consciousness that it's literally pulling it in. It's like, you know, it's like I don't know. One day you might go, right, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to buy vitamins. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start doing this, that, and I'm going to go from this state of being, which I'm feeling a little bit numb and in, to attempting to try and, you know, create a slightly higher vibe for myself by changing the way I eat, changing what I do, maybe doing a bit more exercise, maybe actually kind of rebalancing certain aspects of my life, which could provide a better, more balanced existence for me. And I'll start tomorrow. And then you open the cupboard, and there's a packet of bourbons, and you think, ooh, really tempting, right? Open a packet, I'll have a bourbon. Just have a cup of tea and a bourbon, shall I? And then 8 bourbons later, like me, right? You're still chomping on them. You think, oh, kind of fell for that one again, didn't I? That desire to experience that the taste of chocolate through a bourbon biscuit. I mean, it's great, but then the bourbons, they get finished, don't they? And then there's nothing left, and all you're left with is that empty hole inside that you can't fulfill with bourbons anymore. So our consciousness gets trapped in these desire systems, and what tends to happen is when it gets lost in that dream of desire at times, not realizing that the desire system again is an impermanent cycle, ultimately, of suffering, because you can meet your desires as much as you want, but at some point or at some time, maybe you won't be able to meet those desires. And if you're that reliant and identified with meeting those desires in order to maintain your state of happiness and center and peace, then at some point you're going to get disappointed. You know, there's going to be another fall, isn't there? So by becoming more aware of that, you can start to unpick yourself a little bit. I'm not saying disengage from life, but start to unpick some of the heavier chords that are pulling in your conscious awareness, your perception, into things that aren't necessarily all that healthy for you in the long term. Okay, what else do we get identified? We get identified and captivated by our fears and our doubts. Okay, we can see this happening and playing out quite a lot at the moment. Fears and doubts everywhere right now. Doubts about truth, doubts about information that we're receiving, fear about future, fear of change, fear of uncertainty, all these things. And we can get very, very trapped in that. Instead of coming back to the present moment, relaxing, doing some visualization, doing some pranayama, and going, oh, actually right now everything's okay. Okay, if I start to project too far out, not really knowing, then I'm going to create anxiety for myself. What else are we prisoners of? We're often prisoners, our consciousness get trapped in other people's viewpoints, other people's perceptions of us, right? You know, we do a lot to try and, at times, garner favor from others, garner this this kind of need to please or to fit in. And that's very, very captivating. That's very imprisoning, you know. I think in many ways, the more we genuinely don't give a monkeys about what people think or feel of us, the freer we are. That doesn't mean you can go around being an arsehole, right? It doesn't mean you can go around and hurt people and speak to people in an aggressive way or be rude and that kind of stuff, because that's just offensive, right? But if you are who you are, yeah, if you do what you do, in whatever way you do it, and people aren't happy with that, then most of the time, you know, try not to take it too personally, because as long as you're not harming anyone, you can be who you want to be. You can be how you like. Yeah? If you don't fit in, so what? You'll find a little niche. Everyone does. Everyone find a little tribe to fit into. Okay? Don't all have to be the same. Don't all have to be part of the majority. Life is diversity, right? Life is many colours. Technicolor Dreamcoat. And the more colours in life there are, the more we can learn from each other, right? Because if we're all the same, then there'd be no growth. So I'm prattling on. I think I've written down one more. I'll grab my notepad. There we are. We are. What else are we incarcerated in? I've got a massive list here, so I'm not going to read all of them. So yeah, I've talked about other people's acceptance. That kind of is quite incarcerating. Sometimes we're kind of trapped by the need to compete and be better and win all the time. So again, that's quite egotistical. So when we're comparing, when our conscious get trapped in comparison, we're not relaxed. We're not backing on ourselves. We're not ultimately more concerned with our growth through our own inner landscape. We're constantly chasing this competitive mindset which says, I have to be better than that person, I have to be more successful than. And ultimately, success is your own personal growth. Not everyone's on their own journey, right? Everyone's on their own trip. There's always going to be someone more materially successful than you. There's always going to be someone less materially successful than you. Yeah? Stop comparing, because that's a big trap. And that's a big trap that a lot of people are in at the moment, especially with social media and all that kind of stuff. One more. Let's have a look. Yeah. The physical world. I mean, physicality can get pretty heavy sometimes, can't it? Is it a trap? Is it a prison? I suppose, again, depending on your perception of life in the physical domain, that will kind of determine how you feel about it. But being trapped in physicality for me ultimately means being so materialistic, yeah, i.e., you lose your ability to connect with more inner spiritual landscapes, and then you just think this is it. Yeah. This is it. But it's not. It's not all of it. So what's the point of this video? I don't know. I sometimes just put my phone on and talk. So hopefully you'll have garnered a few little nuggets from it. If you haven't, turn me off. Look within. Yeah. Expand. Expansion doesn't mean expanding out into the world. Expansion actually means looking inward. Yeah? Look inward. Expand in. As you expand in, your perception of your out becomes different. It becomes more expansive. Yes, it's nice to feel expansive and free outside, but sometimes we are constricted for whatever reason. And if we can find expansion within us, then we can be free anywhere, okay, and at any point in time. So yeah, that's right. I was going to talk about the continuum of the soul and the true meaning of Tantra and stuff today, but I'll save that for another video. I kind of just got directed off into what I've just spoken about. So we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you next time.